Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's exactly 7 p.m. and welcome to Heart Hyderabad. And today's edition 4 is about COVID-19. And we have panelists across India. They're all from the International Visitor Leadership Program 2019. We are all members, and in fact, everybody is working on a different role and different activities. Now I have another co-panelist who is Subrat. Subrat, you can say hello to everyone.
Hi.
Subrat, you can introduce the our panelists and we can start the proceedings.
Right. Would you like to talk a couple of lines about the COVID-19 and
Yeah.
then go to the panelists?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sarath, and welcome this team, Mr. Panelist, and all the participants for today. Heart to Heart, episode 4, the civil participation in COVID-19 crisis relief. This is the topic for today's discussion. Pandemic COVID-19 is the defining global crisis, health crisis, and the greatest humanitarian challenge of our time since the World War II. The virus has spread in more than 210 countries across the globe and forcing all the countries to slow the spread of the virus by testing, treating, and tracing contacts. India is going through the lockdown phase, that is phase 3, and the impact may create devastating social, economical, and political crisis that will leave deep scar in the history with no knowledge about when the normalcy is going to come. The central government, in collaboration with all the state government, is leaving no stones unturned and they counter every impact and have been able to delay the transmission process, in fact. However, there has been tremendous response from all the quarters and the citizens of the country. There are many unsung heroes and each is contributing to bits of their efforts to assist the governments. Today, we have the esteemed list of panelists who are, as my friend Sarath said, that we had been together to United States during 2005 as an IVLP under the project of disaster management. This team is very unique and it's very dear to me. And I have a list of panelists with a varied experience and exposure in the disasters from different part of the country, working together and separately as well. It is unique for its multi-sectoral convergence and intersectoral linkages. It has professionals from the health sector, from the engineering sector, from the entrepreneurial sector, humanity, defense, media, academic, and public administration. So this is a brief about the panelists. I would be taking one by one to all the panelists. We have 7 members. In fact, one of our members who is presently engaged in the sending back the migrant laborers from Maharashtra may not be able to join for the discussion, but we have 6 with us. Ratandeep Chaudhary, Dr. Ilya Jafar, Dr. Mirza Muhammad Irshad, Dr. Ashit Mishra, Ms. Kirti Mishra, and Reem Dorji Lepcha. So these are the analysts who would be speaking about their experience, sharing their experience from the ground zero, whatever they have understood, whatever they've been able to do. So we start with the first panelist, Sarath?
Yeah, go ahead.
When we say COVID-19 is moving like a wave across the country, across the globe, and the only constant is the time. And the biggest challenge is that you need to be faster. And during this, and the stake during this outbreak is to make sure people will do the right things to control the disease or mitigate its impact. So it is not only the information to make sure people are informed, it is also making sure the people are informed to act appropriately. Ratandeep Chaudhary, the national correspondent for the Northeast region, would is representing the Northeast states and would be speaking of his experience and in representing NDTV. Ratandeep, welcome. Can you hear me? Ratandeep? I think there is some problem in the network.
I can hear you, but my apologies at my end. Bandwidth is a bit erratic, it's fluctuating. So I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Ratandeep, you know, besides the pandemic of COVID-19, the challenge for us is how to fight the infodemic. Hundreds of channels today, complexity of the situation, the multiple agency working on the research and analysis, growing severity, changing status. How do we manage the challenge of infodemics? Ratandeep.
I think
That's correct. I think infodemics is perhaps even bigger. Infodemics is perhaps.
Sorry, Ratandeep, I think we're not getting your audio at all.
There is a disruption. Can we invite the next panelist for the moment?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Meanwhile, he is sorting out his internet.
Dr. Ilya Jaffer, the Country Advisor Program for Sphere India and Chief Program Officer for Save Life Foundation. She would be speaking primarily on the Sphere India initiative and the preparedness and response of Sphere India to contain COVID-19. Ilya Jaffer.
Thank you, Subrat and Sarath. I'll be sharing my screen for quickly showing to people also about the work that we are doing. But I think a great context when you mentioned about what government is doing, all different actors and how media is managing that. I think that's a great background to the work that Sphere India does. So Sphere India, I mean, just confirm if you're able to see my screen and then. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, as you know, Sphere India is a national coalition of humanitarian agencies in India. It essentially has around 72 members, which include nodal agencies from United Nations, INGOs, NGO networks, CBOs, academic institutions, grassroots level agencies, and overall, if we include the grassroots level agencies who are also our associate members, it's around 805 members in all with whom the agency coordinate. The coordination is all about quality and accountability in humanitarian work, basically in disaster preparedness and response. Now, as you were saying that the government is doing so many efforts to combat the COVID-19 situation, so it is essentially a whole of society approach. And when we say whole of society, every stakeholder has a responsibility and can contribute in terms of preparedness and response. So, here in India, I'll be talking about broadly 3 initiatives. One is where we bring different sectors. For example, it is clearly understood by all that COVID is a health situation. So health actors need to come together. But it's not just limited to health. There are issues of water, sanitation, and hygiene. There are issues of food security, nutrition, livelihoods. There are issues related to shelter. For example, when so many migrants are away. For example, when we need spaces for quarantine, when we need spaces for isolation centers. So there are requirements of shelter. There is a complete disruption of education. So what needs to be done around that? There are protection issues. There are issues of domestic violence. So there are many other secondary impacts also of COVID that need to be looked at. And Sphere India is bringing people together under each of these sectors to think, brainstorm, look at the current situation, look at the gaps, and prepare and respond for these. So that is one thing that we are doing. The other initiative is about unified response. As I said, there are so many actors involved in this, and it is very important to understand who is doing what to avoid duplication as well as to ensure complementing. So there is something called unified response strategy, and on your screen you can see there is a link which can be shared later as well, where there is a mapping. And so far we have more than 226 organizations already mapped across India in terms of who's doing what, and it is a live document, so it gets updated on a regular basis, not just about who's doing what, but also about their community focal persons. It helps engaging with the government, it helps linking them with the corporate CSR organizations, it helps linking them with each other. So this mapping is very, very critical in that sense, and that's the other initiative. The third one is COVID Academy, basically a digital platform for training of volunteers, health workers, frontline workers. So far, we have already trained 31,685, and another program is actually going on right now. And if you look at the state-wise spread, it's across states and UTs. You can see here, even in terms of AP, Telangana, and also it's all the states actually covered where we have how many participants from each state. That's what's shown here. I think this, especially for the listeners, is a great opportunity to engage with. There is this website link, www.sphereindiacovid19academy.org, on which people can register and get to know about the upcoming courses. There are volunteers, health workers, there are things like basics of COVID, starting from that to the non-pharma issues to pharma issues. It's looking at both medical as well as non-medical things which people should know and which will help them in responding to COVID-19. So I think people can engage with this. It targets, for example, this week we were focusing on nurses and midwives. We can also look at engaging with ham operators. We can look at engaging with different professionals on how they can contribute to this, and also in terms of the upcoming disasters. For example, we are entering the season of flood and cyclone very soon. It's monsoons coming up, and with COVID, it's going to be a very complex situation. So we are looking at planning and preparing for that as well. One more last thing I would like to mention is about an interfaith humanitarian alliance that has been started, where we are engaging with faith leaders who are giving messages to communities in their circles in terms of prevention of stigma and discrimination, and also in terms of what to do, what not to do, being government advisories, etc. So I think that's for now. That's from my side. Yeah.
Thank you, Ilya. But then, would you like to talk a few lines about the principles of the humanitarian assistance? You know, the Spear Standards advocates for that. Most of us are aware of it, but then for few who are not aware of it, would you like to highlight that as well?
Sure. So I think, I don't know how many, there are lots of humanitarian principles that we talk of, and especially in this situation where we are seeing discrimination and stigma all across, then the entire principle of, impartiality and non-discrimination and all is challenged right now, because people are associating COVID with either specific communities or the people who are actually coming forward to help and work neutrally. For example, doctors are not differentiating between who's coming for treatment. If they start discriminating that this is a COVID positive person, we won't treat them, then this will be a principle compromise. But they are looking at the principles of the humanitarian principles and ensuring treatment and service to all without any bias. And I think in this situation, therefore, these are the principles which are very, very important.
Thank you. For most of us, we have to understand when we are talking about humanitarian assistance, we have to believe the philosophy behind it, the principles behind it. It's primarily we have to understand that every assistance, humanitarian assistance, every person who is a victim or who has got affected by any disaster or pandemic, it's a right to life with dignity. And second thing is also he has a right for the humanitarian assistance. And then third and very important thing is right to protection and for the security. So these are the primary things which we have been focusing, and the Sphere standards that the Sphere is focusing on. Thank you so much, Celia, and we'll come back to you if there are certain questions by the participants. Sarath, you will move to the next participant.
Yeah, if anybody would like to ask any questions to Ilya, maybe they can even just message me in the chat. Then I will give them the opportunity to ask the questions to them. Meanwhile, if Ratnadeep is fine with his audio, maybe we can go ahead to the Ratnadeep.
Ratnadeep, are you okay?
I'm fine with
Can you
my
hear
audio.
us?
It seems now it's better. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, it seems now it's better. So we were talking about pandemic versus infodemic. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, am I audible?
Yeah, it's delayed, but it's audible.
I'm sorry, my network is erratic. Okay, so we were talking about pandemic versus infodemic, and I think it is a major concern for everybody. I think any journalist who is covering COVID-19, because every day, when particularly in every day when we, every morning when I see social media and I see so much of wrong information, so much of rumor being spread on social media related to COVID-19. So on our day-to-day work, we get so many texts, so many videos, and a large part of our time actually is devoted in terms of trying to fact check, trying to find out the veracity of the videos, trying to fact check the text which has been forwarded. At times, people would call up and looking at a video and say that, I'm calling from this place and a certain thing is happening, certain COVID-19 people are moving around, but which is not the fact. So there's so much of a clutter of information or misinformation which is all around, and that makes the work even more challenging because it takes a lot of your time, your day-to-day time, in terms of finding out what information is correct and what is not. That is one part. Number two is, I think what is important here is I basically report out of Northeast India, which essentially is an area which has been least affected as of now. If you look at different regions and compared, then Northeast has been a far more safer place vis-a-vis COVID-19. But what is essentially for a journalist, whether she's reporting out of Northeast or reporting out of Delhi, out of Kolkata, out of Bombay, out of Chennai, we are the field reporters. We are facing a lot of odds as we report, because it is not like a normal day that you go out and you report. Is your personal safety. You have already read so many stories about journalists getting infected, particularly in Bombay. The journalists got infected, and then across the country, in fact, journalists had to undergo COVID test. In fact, I have also undergone a COVID test in Guwahati. I was the first person who was tested in Guwahati, and thankfully, as of now, my test reports are negative. But what happens is, as a journalist, you are aware that you are moving around a containment zone, you're reporting from outside a containment zone, you're reporting from an area where there might be a COVID positive patient. But then, having known, it is not always possible. While we are maintaining a lot of social distance, we're trying to keep ourselves safe. We are like, using masks, using gloves. When if somebody is reporting from inside the containment area, I've seen people using PPE kit, but even then, you always have a chance of getting exposed to the virus and actually contracting the virus. So, that kind of risk is always there. Number two is that when you are working on a normal day, you need not worry about how you go about doing a story. When you're doing a ground story, okay, you're going and meeting people, you're talking to them. But here you have to make sure that A, you are safe, B, your team is safe. So when you're moving in a car, you make sure that okay, you're also maintaining a distance with your team members in the car. When they are in the field, to make sure that your camera person is keeping a distance from his subject that he's shooting, because his concentration will be more on the subject what he's shooting. And then how do you work out of places where there are containment areas you can't go in, and if there is a story. So I think technology has played a massive role in this. Although unfortunately my network is not helping me right at this moment to connect to you properly, but still a lot of interviews have been done, and in fact I have done a lot of interviews with a lot of people over phone, and then I've asked them that if you can shoot your video on your mobile and send me. So that that distance barrier has kind of been it's not the same thing how when you meet a person in the field and report, and now when you actually virtually interview a person, but still the stories are coming out. That's very important. So in that way, I think it is a very interesting, challenging time for the journalists. These are things which are not there in any of the manuals of any manuals where journalism where journalists are trained for this. Journalists are trained in terms of how you report a disaster. Journalists are trained in terms of how you report on a hazardous situation, how you report out of a conflict. But how you report a pandemic is something that I think a lot of journalists like me are learning each day when we go out in the field. And infodemic is one big menace that we are fighting every day. Secondly, there's a lot of information which ought to be edited, ought to be, there has to be some gatekeeping in those information that needs to be done, are never done on social media. So mainstream media sometimes does this catching up business with social media, and in the process, journalists at times are left in a situation where they really, in one side, you'll have to be very sure about what you are coming up with. In other side, you'll also have to meet the deadlines. You'll have to make sure that you're safe. So the challenges are manifold as a journalist covering COVID-19.
Thank you, Ratan. It was wonderful talking to you. Most of the time we find you on the NDTV as a reporter. Now, listening from you was a very good experience. Would you like to also speak something about the challenges that a common man is facing these days? From the perspective of Northeast provinces, would you like to say something about that? Your experience, how a common man is facing the difficulties or challenges?
Oh, sure. Yes, Subrat. I think in terms of Northeast, you see, we don't have so many cases that you have in other parts of the country, but then our number of cases are increasing. We had last week. One thing that comes to my mind when we talk about common man vis-a-vis COVID, vis-a-vis how a journalist like me who reports from the field look at it. Now, one interesting thing that COVID-19 has kind of brought to us is that how the context completely changes, perhaps overnight. So last week I had been reporting a lot about how Northeast is the least affected area, how 5 states in the Northeast were COVID-free. But then, I was reporting this on last Friday, and then last Saturday, you had that series of infection in one battalion of BSF in a remote corner near, close to the Indo-Bangladesh border in Tripura. And now Tripura has highest number of cases in Northeast, about 118 cases, out of which 104 are CRPF Jawan. So things happen in a very remote area. and people get to know, okay, fine, there was no COVID, suddenly you have 100 people from BSF getting affected, then it creates a lot of panic among people, particularly people who don't have access to too many sources of information. There are still areas in this part of the world which don't have good internet bandwidth. So not everybody is reading up their information about COVID on the social media or on the internet. And so, for a common man perspective, in terms of he's eager to know about this disease because this disease is new to him. He's just dependent on what media is presenting to him. And at times, I have come across news reports which have been a bit of, less sensitive to the fact that it creates fear among a common person. So, the fear about the disease, about the unknown disease among common people is huge. Number two, I think what is important is that for places like Northeast, which are like, landlocked, so we are part of the national lockdown. In fact, if you look at states like from where Rim comes, Sikkim has done wonderful in terms of the lockdown. In fact, when COVID-19 was not the headline story for the country, there was a point of time I remember I was reporting that how Sikkim was the first in terms of imposing its own lockdown. So the lockdown, when people in remote areas are following lockdown pretty well, but then they are not sure that what is happening next. And then when you stay in a remote area, isolated area, in a landlocked area where you need your supplies to come in from your mainland. Now, then there are all these anxieties that people have in terms of when will the movement of the truck, become a bit normal? When will the air services resume? Because we have a lot of people who are still stuck outside and they're trying to come back. Now people are coming back from down south, from Rajasthan. So, in this part of the world, people migrate out for job, for education, and looking for other avenues. So these people are coming back. Their parents are anxious. Not all the state governments have been able to arrange for transport because the train services are also disrupted. So these are questions. And then when they come back home, what do they do? Because a lot of people have lost their jobs. So what do they do in their own state? Because they didn't have jobs. Unemployment is a huge factor in this part of the country. And then what do they do is a big question that they have in their mind. So while the fear of the disease or fear of contracting the disease is huge, but then the larger questions of livelihood, employment, of supplies, and also of transportation outside, because a lot of people, a lot of patients who have to go out to places like Hyderabad, to Delhi, to Bombay, to Chennai for urgent, super specialty medical care, which would involve a surgery or something, have been waiting for months together now, like 2 months. So what happens to them? These are the concerns for people here, because we don't have, in terms of infrastructure, like health infrastructure. Our health infrastructure is not that good, particularly in terms of super specialty treatment as you have down south in Chennai or Hyderabad.
We understand that Northeast is really a difficult terrain for all of us, and we understand how serious and difficult things would have been happening for all of you. But then the hats off to the fraternity of all the media, electronic media, people who have been managing all the correspondence and meeting and the deadlines, sharing the information. Thank you once again, Ratandeep. We'll get back to you. Stay tuned to us. Let's move to our third panelist, Dr. Mirza Mohammad Irshad. He's again from Assam and is the project manager for Assam State Disaster Management Authority, and has been wonderful in his experience and has contributed to the disaster management. Assam is one of the most vulnerable states of the Northeast in terms of natural disasters, and we would request Mohammad Irshad, would you like to share some of your experience managing the disasters working with the government. Primarily, your success stories in terms of community volunteers is a wonderful thing that we have to listen, and also the e-help for the families and individuals.
Thank you, Subrat.
Dr. Mirza.
Yeah, thank you, Subrat. Basically, when the lockdown was declared on 25th March, we had two challenges. One is the medical, that's a health department, they took care of the medical part, and the another challenge was non-medical. We had lots of migrant labor and people stranded in all across the state, and like there were issues, different administrative issues like how to enforce the lockdown. And then we did, in the first week of April, we appealed for a volunteer program. Initially, we were like skeptical how many volunteers we will find, because everybody was at the initial stage, everybody was afraid of going out, because it was a like atmosphere of panicky. That it was amazing. Like within 3 days, we had 16,000 volunteers enrolled in our like website for volunteership, and we had to close down the website. Like we had to 16,000 volunteers, because then we did the other thing. The registration part was done. Then we did the sorting and training the volunteers. And we have 33 districts, and we deployed all the volunteers. We named it Protirodi Bondhu. Protirodi Bondhu in Assamese means the resistant friends. Like we deployed the Protirodi Bondhu volunteers in all the districts. They are now part and parcel of the district administration. They are helping district administrations in different non-medical activities like distributing relief and running shelters for the migrant laborers, then like promoting hygiene and social distancing. And then like in the mid of April, that from media and all these things, we like come to know about different problems. Like now there are some elderly people, some children who are stuck at homes, and there are some like stranded migrants whose shops and business are closed, and like that they had some mental health problems and they need counseling. Then we had a meeting with common service centers. We have 6,000 common service centers all across the state, and we have started doing telemedicine and counseling to the like needy elderly people and these people. That how we actually started. Our Protirodi volunteers, they will go to the persons, and then they will connect him to the nearest common service center, and the common service center people will go to him, and they will connect him to the panel of doctors, and in an appointed time they will give the telemedicine and the mental health counseling as well. So till now we have actually completed around 8,000 plus telemedicine through this scheme. And then come the partnership with the NGOs and community-based organizations. Initially, like the initial response for the migrant laborers and people who are stuck in the district due to lockdown, where governments were giving food and shelter, and in some cases the owners of the industries or the employers, they are providing food and shelter to the employees. Then the NGOs and community based organizations and civil society organizations that came. Then actually we have interagency group very active here. All the major like NGOs are part of the interagency group. We had a meeting with the interagency group, and like we place our relief efforts and our things very judiciously. Like where government is responding, then they are the NGOs and civil society organizations are not responding. Like where civil society organizations and NGOs are running food shelters, relief camps, their government is helping them, but government is not responding. Like government is focusing on other areas. Like we are having regularly, like we are having regular meetings at district level as well as at the state level. Like at the state level of Assam State Disaster Management Authority, and the districts we have district disaster management authorities. Like we are having regular meetings. And now, like our partnership will go beyond this COVID thing, because the monsoon is coming. Like in next 2 weeks, most likely the monsoon will enter in this part of India. Then, like this time, it will be very challenging because we have the COVID thing, and at the same time we have to relocate like several people, thousands of people to the relief camp. So now we are working on relief camp management in context of COVID. Now we are working with the interagency group and the NGOs, like they will also help us. Now we have already thought out a plan. Now this time we'll notify the capacity of the relief camps. Like we'll pre-identify the relief camps and relief shelters where during the flood people will be shifted or evacuated and shifted. And like this time we'll display the number of this such X relief camp, and only 50 people will be allowed to stay there. And social distancing and all the COVID norms will be like abide by the relief camp management committee and all the service providers. And basically the three initiatives are like related, like the volunteer program and then the e-health through the common service centers, and then working with the NGOs and civil society groups. And now like gradually new like dimensions of the problem is like arising. Like as Ratnadip told in his speech, like now a lot of people are coming back from different parts of India, like who are working in South India, in different North India and different parts of, now they have started coming back. And the issue of livelihood is coming up. Then initially, then if flood is also, like we are expecting flood very soon. Then like we are now working in like this to address these issues, like how to support livelihood efforts and how to like this thing, giving them relief and giving them medical help and psychosocial help. And I think like it's a very challenging time, and I think we'll overcome it.
I'm sure you would overcome it, Dr. Mirza. And thank you so very much. Sanjay, there is a question from you. Would you like to hold it for a while? There are 3 more panelists. Thank you, Mirza, once again.
Go ahead to the next one.
Yeah, I'd like to share that we had one more panelist, Ms. Rajeshwari Kori. She's a retired commandant from the Deputy Controller of Civil Defense. She is a lady with enthusiasm and energy and a lot of compassion for the disaster management. Despite all the odds, she was supposed to be with us, but fortunately, or unfortunately for us, in fact, fortunately for those people who are migrating, who are coming back from Maharashtra to Bihar, Orissa, and Andhra Pradesh, she is facilitating with her team to send them back. May God bless her, and we would hope that we would get some reports from her. Sarath, would you like to facilitate once she is back? And then we'll go to the next panelist. Is Dr. Asit Mishra. Is an instructor at the Department of Emergency Medicine and Science in IXL, University of Nebraska Medical. Am I correct?
Yeah, go ahead.
And he is the co-founder and the vice president of Medi Education Guru.
Welcome, doctor, from US. You know, we all of us are a bit of aware of the personal hygiene, behavior, social distancing. What are the few things that is vital for a common man to understand and get prepared? Could you please elaborate? You know, common things we understand. Something which is very, very vital, you know, something like test, different type of test that is required, or the treatment, kind of treatment that is being administered, tracing contacts, symptomatic and asymptomatic patients or the carriers, a bit of it. That would be good enough for us.
Well, thanks, Subrat, for the introduction. And this is right now is a pandemic, and as your questions are very specific to how to trace the symptomatic versus asymptomatic, I would like to say that, you know, with some research and studies, we found out that there are patients who are asymptomatic for a large, you know, amount of time, and those can be really be, you know, dangerous for the community, because we don't know like who they are and things. And that can be when we talk about, you know, personal hygiene. If we know that we cannot trace those people, they are not having symptoms of fever or cough or anything, what we need to do is to at least educate our society or people to, you know, at least cover their faces and try to not to sneeze or cough in common areas, and to be really, you know, mindful of these things. That's very important. Just, you know, sharing some more information on this. If you see, when we do the testing, basically at this point we are doing PCR testing, RT-PCR, which all these kits which are used, those are those tests. So it will detect anything after only 7 days. You know, the sensitivity goes, you know, is more higher when they are at least 7 days or something from the contamination from the person when he got first contaminated from that virus. So it takes around 7 days for the RT-PCR. And then another 10 days it takes for the other test, which is IgG, IgM antibodies test. So at least, you know, you have 7 to 10 days before you can trace that person. So just think of that 7 to 10 days where that person is not, doesn't have any symptoms, and that person is out in the community and spreading. With the research, current research and data which is right now published, we can, you know, understand that one COVID positive patient, one can at least, you know, infect at this point globally, the data is that can infect at least 2 to 4%. So, you know, that person, if it's not traced, that person can, and that's how this chain is, you know, becoming higher. I was listening to Ratandeep when he told that there was no cases in in the northeastern region of India, and suddenly you see the spike. So how it's happening, that this chain is not, you know, this chain is there. And then if you see also the next thing which is important is the case fatality rate. This infection has a case fatality rate of 0 to 6% globally. And at this point in India, I was looking at some data which from the studies, the case fatality rate, I mean, is around 2-3%. So we are like halfway from the global, you know, standards. So this is good. I mean, nothing is good, but, you know, at least we are our case fatality rate is not that high as compared to other countries or global, you know, standards. But now coming back to your previous question, how we can stop it, like what are the things we can do to, you know, really contain the infection? And there's a lot of information outside. I think most of people and most of us understand that normal things, logical things can help us to stop the spread. I would say when I see, you know, on a higher level, just thinking of this, we are fighting an invisible enemy. This is a tiny virus. We are fighting against this tiny virus whom we cannot see. So if we cannot see that virus, that enemy, so what is the best strategy to, you know, fight this person, this enemy? I would say that if you don't see your enemy, you have to hide. And hiding means that you stay away from, you know, places where you can get infected. So hide yourself. The more you hide yourself, the more safe you are. I mean, that's the conclusion. Though there are things like where people say that you have to wash your hands. Definitely you have to wash your hands 20 seconds soap water washing out, 60% alcohol if you don't have soap water and things. Cover your face, use face mask. If you don't have that, homemade, you know, cloth masks are also good. I mean, for the large population, if at least what will happen that if we are covering our face and we are non-symptomatic, at least we are not spreading the infection outside, at least we are containing to ourselves. So that is the idea. For healthcare purposes, we are using N95 mask if we are treating an infected patient. If the patient is not infected, it's not COVID positive, then we are just using surgical mask at this point. Yeah, stay at home, try to maintain maximum social distancing, hand hygiene, common things. These things are going to help. In terms of treatment, as of now, again, there is no concrete evidence-based, research, medicine or research at this point that is supporting any treatment strategies. Just the symptomatic treatment as of now. There are things which are going on. There are different antiviral, medications and hydroxychloroquine and other things are being tested. There are people who are talking about these things, but again, not evidence-based. Studies are right now going on, so we are waiting for that. Once we get some concrete data to give some evidence that this therapy is effective versus the other, then I think I can say something with some proof or data. At this point, I would say symptomatic treatment is what we are doing. All these new therapies and things are just being on a test and are on a test bed as of now. Yes, I think this is what it is. Any questions? I'll be happy to
Would you like to talk something about how the asymptomatic are turning into negative? Are there any possibility of asymptomatic turning into negative? And how are the patients who are being treated gradually recovering?
Mm-hmm. So, trying to get in your question, asymptomatic turning to negative means you are trying to ask that.
Are there any possibility of asymptomatic turning into negative?
I don't think so, because asymptomatic means that person is still having the virus, inside. It's just the symptoms are not out. That person is still can, infect other people. So it is just that how to trace them. The biggest challenge is to trace them. Some countries have used the, random population size where they just go and check, people from certain areas, and they just see whether they are randomly, they select randomly, different people and see whether this is an area where there are more asymptomatic people or not. Asymptomatic person turning into negative, I mean, that will be only when that person is just sitting at home, isolated in quarantine, and in a natural way, that person just gets cured, If you see that it is not infecting, even if you are getting infected, young, you can still sit at home, and it will be a normal virus like illness. The problem is with the elderly people and then special population where they have a low immune status, they can really get hit, infected, and then they can turn into other comorbid conditions can add into it, and then they can, they basically are the worst population that are getting hit by this thing. So around, if you see, there is a data, it says anyone who is more than 60 years of age, the case fatality rate is very high on those people, and morbidity is also high in that population group.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much. And now my request would be to Kirti Mishra. Kirti Mishra is calling from the CRS, Catholic Relief Services, and we were together from Odisha. Odisha is one of the vulnerable states in terms of disaster is concerned, and when it comes to managing the COVID, Odisha state government has taken a very leading steps in so many things. Kirti would be sharing her experience working with the government and with the NGOs. She is the head of the CRS, as I told you, and Odisha government has a very good experience working the government and non-government agencies coordination. Kirti, would you like to share your experience talking about how these lockdown measures were taken by the government of Odisha, and what has been the achievement so far?
Thank you, Subrat, and good evening, all the members present here. So, yeah, as Subrat mentioned, Odisha state government has always been very proactive in dealing with disasters. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, it's some internet is unstable. Even in COVID-19, I think Odisha has commendable job so far, and we have seen very brave steps taken by the government. One of the things that they have done is the lockdown step. The step of lockdown was taken before we started announcing this. The second phase of lockdown was also extended for Odisha state and then followed by the state governments and national government. So in that, the government and the Odisha State Disaster Management Authority, they are all working together in the sense that they are learning from the experiences they have since 99 cyclone. I think learnings have been really enough, and they really what this loss of life means to us and to everybody in the region. And is there is really a commendable job in terms of setting up even the geo-NGO mechanism. So we already have that mechanism very strong.
I think there's some problem with the Kirti. You can go ahead with the.
Sorry, I'm back.
Great. Okay, go ahead, Kirti.
Yeah. So I try to finish at the time as well. So I think I'm trying to say is that the geo-NGO coordination mechanism most of the time is very at level, but comes to the level we have faced challenge. But based as interagency, so the consortium of national NGO, the state government and the OSD taken keen and immediate step to kind of activate it across the 30 districts that we have in the state. So that's a very important, that was the beginning. Maintain way to understand the case. Each organized to its strength, how we can this or fight COVID-19, and that government understands the level on each civil society bring to the table what government can, and therefore the role of civil so very important with this. We have the skills that
Kirti, we are missing your audio.
Now these is.
Kirti, we are missing your audio.
It seems my end.
Kirti, can you hear us?
Is it okay now?
No, it's completely voice breaking. Yeah, now it's better. Yeah, go ahead, Kirti.
Yeah. So quarantine center. Yeah, the centers that are at GP level has announced that each Gram Panchayat Sarpanch or the leader of the Gram Panchayat has the power of a director, which is an important step. They know the issue state face migrants. We are all our colleague, our friend is trying to from migrants bodies, and state has often geared up system to a robust system so that they can be screened, they can be, and they are providing facilities. In this NGOs or this in those quarantine center. Apart from that, with the government, they are also playing a role in terms of providing hygiene kits, awareness raising, the food items that is much needed. And therefore, they are trying to reduce the vulnerabilities of these migrant people and the people who are affected or infected by COVID-19. I'll talk briefly about what CRS is trying to do. So CRS is OSDMA at the approach or try with the situation, but we are also trying to adapt the way we. So, for example, Ina mentioned earlier, about.
Kirti, we are really missing your audio. Kirti, Its audio is not audible properly. No, it's not audible properly. There's a lot of voice.
Your voice is cracking, Kirti, and possibly we'll wait for a while and then we'll go to the next participant, this panelist. And once your voice, the frequency is okay, we'll come back to you. Is that okay?
Sounds good, Subrat. And if I am audible, I can just finish quickly to the next.
No, it's not audible. It's not clear. So just check again.
I'll try to share a bit of my experience. What Kirti was trying to share is, we have to understand the socio-economic background of the vulnerable states of India. Primarily they are agrarian in the economy. Most of them fail to meet the minimum requirement, and then they move out as a migrant population to the western part of the country in search of a job. And now these developed states are in the red zone. Red zone, they've acquired it. After a lockdown period of around 40-45 days, now people are moving back to the state. Orissa, Bihar, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, and they are having this population back. Now these states which we were partially green or orange, now they're turning to red and deep red. So we have to understand the challenges. In this context, we'll again come back to Kirti.
Yes.
But in the
am I audible now?
No, Kirti, no, Kirti. No, it's not at all. No, Kirti, it's not audible. Go ahead.
I'll come. My network is.
Yeah, go ahead with RIMP, Subrat.
Yeah, now the person from the most beautiful state of Northeast, for me, in fact, it's a personal view. And the Sikkim, the smallest state of our country with a very advantageous geographical location with an international border and one state which is bordering. And this is the only state in the country presently who have been able to put themselves in the self-quarantine, the whole state, and they have prevented the entry of the COVID. Congratulations to the whole team of the Sikkim administration. RIMP, Dorji Lepcha, who is the superintending engineer of project and planning and the project director for Asian Development Bank, and also leading the tourism civil aviation department for the government of Sikkim. Welcome, RIMP. Would you like to share the success story from Sikkim? Most of us believe that success of Sikkim lies in the lifestyle and the discipline, the uniquely that they have been practicing in Sikkim.
Good evening, Subrat and Sharat, and to everyone. It's nice to see all of us talking since last 2015, and it's an initiative of Sharat to do this. And the first thing to tell is there's law and order in the whole country, but I think Sikkim is the only one who follows the law and order. So it is kind of what to say. I was just looking at some facts, and when on the 25th of March, when there was a lockdown announced by the Prime Minister of India, we had already barred the entry of foreign tourists because it was kind of a tourist season for us, because it starts at March, and being the tourist state in India, we had barred the foreign tourists from 5th of March. That was roughly about 20 days ahead of the lockdown. And on my own personal front, my cousins had come from Australia and they had reached the border and we had to send them back. We said that we can't do anything, you have to go back. And then what we did was on the 17th of March, we closed down for the domestic tourists also. So immediately after it was announced on 17th, by 19th, the entire administration went around the entire states, all the hotels, and we asked all the tourists, domestic tourists, to leave state of Sikkim. If they had to be paid, if the hotels had to pay them for whatever the losses, we ensured that they paid them, and we asked them to leave the state. So, and now the second part was we have our intersectoral coordination, which is really strong. Intersectoral coordination means right from the Honorable Chief Minister till the panchayat and the councillors. So the entire machinery went into full swing. And what we did was, out of the 10 checkposts we have, where the entry is there, right from the international borders in the west to the Bhutan and Nepal, and to the West Bengal, we closed down the entire checkpost except for 2, which we come where people come from West Bengal. That is towards the South and West District, one checkpost, and one which enters in the North and East for all our food trucks and necessary items. So we kind of closed everything. And at the moment, we are COVID zero and we are on green zone. So at this time, our taxis are running, the shops are open, and we are doing all the guys who are in the forefront, they're getting that COVID test done. So I think about 5 to 6 days, their tests have been done. And just now even constructions are taking place. And now the funny thing is, where the whole world is fighting how to stop COVID, our government is now thinking on economic revival plan. So we are already one step ahead of the entire world, and we are on the economic revival plan. Thank you very much. I think we have taken a lot of time. So
would you like to also highlight something? You know, there are such stories that migrant laborers who have been to Sikkim are not willing to come out from this state. You know, while other states, they are moving back to their own state, and Sikkim is a reverse thing. You would like to say something?
Yeah, it is kind of a 70-30 kind of a proposition, where 30% want to leave and about 70% they want to stay back. Because firstly, they know that it's a COVID-free state. Second, all our constructions, everything is on track. Everybody is working here. So once they're getting paid, they have realized that going back and not getting paid doesn't make sense. And second thing, the government is ensuring anybody outside who are the below poverty line or the migrant laborers are being given supplies, rations like 20 kgs of rice and 6 kgs of potatoes and onions and oil. The basic necessity is being given to everyone in the below poverty line and to the migrant laborers every month. So at least the food is there. And secondly, they're getting paid because the construction work is going on at the moment.
Great. Reef, would you like to also share something about the successful coordination and collaboration between the government and the other stakeholders? How successful is that?
Yeah, the main thing is actually now the main problem for us is to get back we have about 3,000 to 4,000, roughly about 3,500 to 600 people, Sikkimese people who are stranded outside Sikkim. So the biggest challenge for us is to get them back to Sikkim, because some are studying outside in schools and colleges, and some are out in the medical, like cancer patients and kidney patients and all that. Those kind of people are outside, like in Delhi, Bombay. And so the biggest challenge is to get them back. And now the thing is, how do we track them? So what has happened is the government has asked the panchayats and the councillors to go to their wards and to find out how many number of people are outside and they want to come back to Sikkim. So that we have tracked down to about 3,500, roughly about 3,500. And we have opened up a portal through NIC, National Informatics Center, where they have to log online and ask for permission to come back home. And what we are doing is, since past 5 days, we have slowly in phase-wise manner bringing our Sikkimese people back home. But they will be quarantined in the border, in the quarantine center for 14 days. And after they do their checkup, and then only they are asked to go back home. So, right from distribution of rations to collecting number of people who are stranded outside, everything is being done right from the panchayat or the councillor level. And to tell you, the Honorable Chief Minister has been going to the border, to the quarantine center, almost every once a week, and checking everything has been done and everything is looked after, and even right till the finances have been worked out. And just about 2 days back, secretary to the Chief Minister went down and checked all the food, how the food has been given to the students who are coming back, and all these things, and to the quarantine centers is being checked every day. We just had the secretary gone. Today, the Secretary of Health has gone to check the food, the facility, everything is at the micro level, it's being checked. Thank God our population is very less. Again, we got to, yeah.
No, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rimpan. You know, the rules, the laws, and the disciplines are all laid down. You know, one thing that you have to learn, what Dr. was also sharing, is that, you know, you have to learn how to be within the rules, how to follow and abide them, and how to understand. And the only thing that you have to understand is how to manage yourself. Your own little family. Sorry.
And to just give you a small gist about how we are doing it, is like, unlike where you have seen in the other parts of India where the police are hitting you with the lathis, here what they do is they offer you garland if you're not wearing a mask or doing that, and they give you a mask also. So it's the other way around. They tell you, okay, you're doing something wrong, and then they give you a mask, please wear a mask, and they offer a garland saying that you're not wearing it, and you're creating a problem for other people. So we are the other way around. We kind of do that.
Thank you so much, Rim. We have, in fact, with your permission, we have already crossed the time. But then, Sarath, would we like to take some questions from the other participants? Do we have some time?
Yeah, we will take 1 or 2 questions and then we'll move on.
Great. Any questions?
Subrat, we have Sanjay who would like to ask a question. Let me unmute him. So he'll ask directly the question and then we'll move on.
Yes, sir.
Sanjay, you can ask your question, please.
Is Sanjay there?
Sanjay?
Yeah, can you hear me, please?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah,
go ahead with your question.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Is it edible? Is video?
It's no video. You can go ahead with your question, please.
Okay. Okay. The thing is that it's been tremendous listening you all. Very nice stories from the East State. From the East State. However, I am from the UK. I am listening here. I'm just comparing that how governments over here doing and how in India how they are well managing everything. Yeah, I'm just a bit comparison. Also, my question is, if how the disaster management team or panel you guys will influence to leaders like state-wise or national leaders to influence how if the relaxation is going to be eased very soon, like for example, children schools are remain closed, then parents can't go to their job, and what could be the social distancing norms could be, and the basic parameters how the leaders can judge these very pandemic situation and disaster.
Thank you, Sanjay. And would you like any specific panelist to answer this, or would you like to direct it to someone who could be better in answering this?
Oh, I don't mind for any panelist. Yeah.
I think
Ilya, would you like to?
Yeah,
sorry. Ilya, would you like to answer this?
Sure. So, very good question. First of all, Mr. Sanjay, it's very important, and I'm sure when you're comparing from your country to India, it must be very different. But in terms of influencing, at least with the civil societies, I can talk about the way Sphere India is doing at national level, and also interagency groups of various civil society organizations at state levels. They are the ones who are bringing the voices and the concerns of people together, and then meeting at state level. When we talk of where they are meeting the state disaster management authorities, at national level, there are calls for actions being drafted jointly on behalf of all the agencies, being submitted to Niti Aayog, being submitted to different ministries, and also being shared on various platforms, and also with NDMA in the meetings. So that's the way influencing is being thought of. And also within the areas where civil society organizations are working, they are trying to bring a behavior change. And also when I mentioned the call for action addresses different stakeholders. For example, what should offices or employers do, what should media do, what should government do, what should housing societies do, what should civil societies do. So there are different target audiences for whom call for actions are being designed. What is ongoing is also that certain civil societies are designing certain guidelines, especially in areas, as you rightly said, that if people start going to work and schools are not open, children will be left at home. So what do we do? So currently, even the way the lockdown is being opened is in a phase-wise manner. In many places like Delhi, even where offices are open, the condition is that not more than 33%. So the offices are also looking and considering on how best do we look at the situation. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Ilya. And I'll just try to add one more thing, Mr. Patra, is that, the National Disaster Management Act, in the National Disaster Management Act, the civil society organization plays a very vital role. And, they are a cardinal part of the policy making. It's not like the bureaucrats sit and they decide, or the elected representatives sit and decide. It's generally in India, this has been very, very enforced and also very, very strong in that. So all these things that is developing, of course, it's new for everybody, but yes, it is in consultation. I hope it answers your question.
Yes, yeah.
I can add one more point if I'm audible.
Kirti?
Yeah. So I think all these stakeholders have a role to play in and fighting with this COVID-19. But I want to emphasize the point of volunteers. However efforts the government and civil society do, but the reality is that every individual has a role to play. And if I can take care of myself, my family, I think everyone in the community like that can contribute to the society and check this virus to spread from. And the other point is that every department, not only the disaster management authority, but all the departments, be it education, be it health, everyone is training their frontline workers how to deal with it, and they are building the capacity. And I have never seen such a massive effort to train each and every.
Sarath.
We lost the audio.
Any other questions, Sarath? Any participant?
I think there's no questions, what I heard, and we'll wrap up the session at the moment. And thank you, everyone, for joining today's evening session about the COVID.
There is one participant visible, that is Gunjan Tripathi. Is he interested to ask some questions?
No, I did not get any question requests.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Right. And from the whole team of panelists, I take the opportunity to thank Sarath, especially for his initiative. Despite all odds and engagements, he has been pushing all of us through getting this meeting done. Special thanks to Corey. Despite her absence, she has been able to send her information and updates. And Dr. Mishra from USA, even if it's early in the morning, he has to rush back to his office. And Rip must be feeling sleepy right now. And thank you so very much, Ilya, Sanjay, Kirti, Gunjan, and others. Last word from Sarath, if there is any. We'll wrap up then.
Yeah, thank you very much to everyone. And in fact, from the Heart to Heart Hyderabad, we thank all the participants as well as everyone who joined today's evening program. Thank you all, and see you on the next program very soon.
Thank you.
Sarath, send us the pictures as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Subrat. We'll catch you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Kirti, I'm sorry, there's a lot of network issue for you. Well,